The reign of King Edward III, commonly shortened to Edward III, is an Elizabethan play printed anonymously in 1596. It has frequently been claimed that it was at least partly written by William Shakespeare, a view that Shakespeare scholars have increasingly endorsed. The rest of the play was probably written by Thomas Kyd. The play contains several gibes at Scotland and the Scottish people, which has led some critics to think that it is the work that incited George Nicolson, Queen Elizabeth's agent in Edinburgh, to protest against the portrayal of Scots on the London stage in a 1598 letter to William Cecil, Lord Burghley. This could explain why the play was not included in the First Folio of Shakespeare's works, which was published after the Scottish King James had succeeded to the English throne in 1603. Characters: Earl of Salisbury, partially based on Sir Walter de Manny. Salisbury was deceased by the events of the second half of the play. Countess of Salisbury, Salisbury's wife. Although the story of Edward III's infatuation with her is based on an incident involving Alice of Norfolk, Salisbury's sister-in-law, Lord Audley, portrayed as an old man, though he was historically no older than 30 at the time of the play. Robert, Count of Artois, partially based on Sir Godfrey de Harcourt. Artois was deceased by the events of the second half of the play. King John II. Some of his actions in the play were actually undertaken by his predecessors, King Charles IV and King Philip VI. Synopsis: Edward the Black Prince, David Mendelsohn, in the American professional premiere of Edward III, staged by Pacific Repertory Theatre in August 2001. King Edward III is informed by the Count of Artois that he, Edward, was the true heir to the previous King of France. A French ambassador arrives to insist that Edward do homage to the new French king for his lands in Guyenne. Edward defies him, insisting he will invade to enforce his rights. A messenger arrives to say that the Scots are besieging a castle in the north of England. Edward decides to deal with this problem first. The castle is being held by the beautiful Countess of Salisbury, the wife of the Earl of Salisbury. As Edward's army arrives, the rampaging Scots flee. Edward immediately falls for the Countess, and proceeds to woo her for himself. She rebuffs him, but he persists. In an attempted bluff, the Countess vows to take the life of her husband if Edward will take the life of his wife. However, when she sees that Edward finds the plan morally acceptable, she ultimately threatens to take her own life if he does not stop his pursuit. Finally, Edward expresses great shame, admits his faults and acquiesces. He dedicates himself to use his energies to pursue his rights and duties as king. In the second part of the play, in several scenes reminiscent of Henry V, Edward joins his army in France, fighting a war to claim the French throne. He and the French king exchange arguments for their claims before the Battle of Crécy. King Edward's son, Edward, the Black Prince, is knighted and sent into battle. The king refuses to send help to his son when it appears that the young man's life is in danger. Prince Edward proves himself in battle after defeating the King of Bohemia. The English win the battle and the French flee to Poitiers. Edward sends the prince to pursue them, while he besieges Calais. In Poitiers, the prince finds himself outnumbered and apparently surrounded. The play switches between the French and English camps, where the apparent hopelessness of the English campaign is contrasted with the arrogance of the French. Prince Edward broods on the morality of war before achieving victory in the Battle of Poitiers. Against seemingly insurmountable odds, he captures the French king. In Calais, the citizens realize they will have to surrender to King Edward. Edward demands that 6 of the leading citizens be sent out to face punishment. Edward's wife, Queen Philippa, arrives and persuades him to pardon them. Sir John Copeland brings Edward the King of the Scots, captured in battle, and a messenger informs Edward that the English have secured Brittany. However, the successes are undercut when news arrives that Prince Edward was facing certain defeat at Poitiers. King Edward declares he will take revenge. Prince Edward arrives with news of his victory, bringing with him the captured French king. The English enter Calais in triumph. Authorship. In 1596, Edward III was published anonymously, which was common practice in the 1590s. The first quarto editions of Titus Andronicus and Richard III also appeared anonymously. Additionally, Elizabethan theatre often paid professional writers of the time to perform minor additions and emendations to problematic or overly brief scripts. The additions to the popular but brief Dr. Faustus and Shakespeare's own editions on the unperformed Sir Thomas More being some of the best known. No holographic manuscript of Edward III is extant. The principal arguments against Shakespeare's authorship are its non-inclusion in the First Folio of Shakespeare's plays in 1623 and being unmentioned in Francis Meres Pilates Timea, a work that lists many, but not all, of Shakespeare's early plays. Some critics view the play as not up to the quality of Shakespeare's ability, and they attribute passages resembling his style to imitation or plagiarism. In recent years, professional Shakespeare scholars have increasingly reviewed the work with a new eye, and have concluded that some passages are as sophisticated as any of Shakespeare's early histories, especially King John and the Henry VI plays. In addition, passages in the play are direct quotes from Shakespeare's sonnets, most notably the line, "Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds," Sonnet 94, and the phrase, "scarlet ornaments," used in Sonnet 142. Stylistic analysis has also produced evidence that at least some scenes were written by Shakespeare. The play was subsequently edited by William Montgomery and included in the second edition of the Oxford Complete Works, 2005. The first major publishing house to produce an edition of the play was Yale University Press. In 1996, Cambridge University Press published an edition 2 years later as part of its New Cambridge Shakespeare series. Since then, an edition of the Riverside Shakespeare has included the play, and plans are afoot for the Arden Shakespeare and Oxford Shakespeare series to publish editions. Giorgio Melchiori, editor of the New Cambridge edition, asserts that the play's disappearance from the canon is probably due to a 1598 protest at the play's portrayal of the Scottish. According to Melchiori, scholars have often assumed that this play, the title of which was not stated in the letter of the 15th of April 1598 from George Nicolson, Elizabeth I's Edinburgh agent, to Lord Burghley, noting the public unrest, was a comedy, one that does not survive. But the play's portrayal of Scots is so virulent that it is likely that the play was banned, officially or unofficially, and left forgotten by Hemminges and Condell. The events and monarchs in the play would, along with the two history tetralogies and Henry VIII, extend Shakespeare's chronicle to include all the monarchs from Edward III to Shakespeare's near contemporary Henry VIII. Some scholars, notably Eric Sams, have argued that the play is entirely by Shakespeare. But today, scholarly opinion is divided, with many researchers asserting that the play is an early collaborative work, of which Shakespeare wrote only a few scenes. In 2009, Brian Vickers published the results of a computer analysis using a program designed to detect plagiarism, which suggests that 40% of the play was written by Shakespeare, with the other scenes written by Thomas Kyd. Harold Bloom rejects the theory that Shakespeare wrote Edward III, on the grounds that he finds nothing in the play is representative of the dramatist who had written Richard III. Quote, Attributions. Performance history. The first modern performance of the play was on the 6th of March 1911, when the Elizabethan Stage Society performed Act II at the Little Theatre in London. Following this, the BBC broadcast an abridged version of the play in 1963, with complete performances taking place in Los Angeles in 1986, as part of a season of Shakespeare Apocrypha, and Mold in 1987. In 1977, the play was incorporated into the marathon BBC radio dramatic series Vivid Rex as episodes 3, Obsession, and 4, The Black Prince, with Keith Mitchell as Edward III, Christopher Neame as Edward the Black Prince, and Richard Burton as the narrator. In 1998, Cambridge University Press became the first major publisher to produce an edition of the play under Shakespeare's name, and shortly afterward the Royal Shakespeare Company performed the play to mixed reviews. In 2001, the American professional premiere was staged by Pacific Repertory Theatre's Carmel Shakespeare Festival, which received positive reviews for the endeavor. In 2002, the Royal Shakespeare Company's production was performed as part of a season of little-done plays by Shakespeare's contemporaries, along with such titles as The Roman Actor by Philip Massinger and Eastward Ho by Ben Jonson. The production was directed by Anthony Clark and starred David Rintoul as King Edward and Caroline Faber as the Countess. It was performed at the Swan Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, a venue known for tackling more non-mainstream titles. The production mixed costuming and set elements that included medieval armor and weaponry with 19th-century-style military uniforms. In 2009, director Donna Northcott of the Orthwine Theatre in St. Louis produced a traditionally set production on a multi-tiered set. In 2011, the Atlanta Shakespeare Company presented a production in repertory with the two noble kinsmen at their Shakespeare Tavern Theatre. In his director's note, director Troy Willis stressed the various elements of honor and chivalry found in the play were often taught to the nobility by characters who were lower in social station than themselves. This is notable in the Countess instructing King Edward and oddly instructing the young prince. In 2014, the Hawaii Shakespeare Festival, HSF, presented an anime, video game-style production that was notable for using dancers as stand-ins for King Edward and King John as they controlled the dancers from the sides of the stage. Rhiannon Latimer as Ned, the Black Prince, with Ben Forer as his father Edward III in Hudson Shakespeare Company's production of King Edward III. In 2016, the Hudson Shakespeare Company presented a production as part of their Shakespeare in the Park series and their History Cycle treatment of Shakespeare as second or major cycle, producing it along with Richard II and Henry IV, Part 1, and Henry IV, Part 2, as Edward III takes place 2 generations before Richard II, which was done in a late medieval style. Edward III was placed in an early medieval Viking setting to depict an earlier time. Other notable features included by artistic director John Ciccarelli were a Viking party scene that bridged the Edward-Countess meeting scene with the Lodowick monologue and included an historical dramatization of Edward's founding of the Order of the Garter, stressing the mutual attraction between Edward, Ben Forer, and the Countess, Rachel Matusevich.